Emily Carter did not plan to follow her husband that evening, but life sometimes pushed people forward before they were ready, and that Thursday in Boston carried a strange tension from the moment the sun began to set. Mark moved around their apartment with unusual energy, checking his phone, dressing with more care than he had shown in months, and when he kissed her goodbye, it felt rushed and empty, like a habit instead of love, and the door closed behind him before Emily could even ask where he was going, leaving her alone with a tight feeling in her chest that refused to fade. So when she looked out the window and saw him walking quickly toward his car, something inside her snapped, not with anger but with a quiet need to know the truth, and without giving herself time to think, she grabbed her coat and followed him down the street, her heart beating fast as if it already understood what her mind was still denying, the city around her buzzing with evening traffic and distant voices while she stayed focused on the familiar shape of her husband moving ahead. And when Mark drove away, fear washed over her that she might lose him before she found answers, so she raised her hand desperately and flagged down the nearest taxi, the car stopping with a soft sound as the window rolled down to reveal a calm-looking driver with warm brown eyes and a steady presence. And when he asked where she wanted to go, Emily surprised herself by saying, "Please follow the silver sedan." Ahead, her voice shaking but clear, and instead of questioning her or looking annoyed, the driver simply nodded and merged into traffic smoothly, as if he sensed that this ride was important. And as they followed Mark's car through busy streets and quiet turns, Emily sat stiffly in the back seat, her thoughts racing through memories of her marriage, the early years filled with laughter, shared dreams, and late-night talks, and how slowly those moments had faded into silence, missed dinners, and excuses. And now every red light felt too long and every green light too fast, while the driver, Daniel, as she would later learn, kept a careful distance, his eyes alert but gentle in the rearview mirror, noticing the way Emily twisted her hands together and stared ahead without blinking. And though the city lights reflected off the windows like passing stars, her mind was locked on the possibility that her life was about to change forever. Then suddenly Mark's car slowed and turned into a street near the harbor, and Emily's breath caught as they followed, the smell of salt from the water mixing with the cool night air. And when the silver sedan parked outside a softly lit restaurant, Daniel eased the taxi to the side and waited, the engine humming quietly while Emily leaned forward, her heart pounding so loudly she felt sure it could be heard. And then Mark stepped out of the car, straightening his jacket, looking relaxed and happy in a way Emily had not seen in a long time, and before she could process that pain, another woman appeared, smiling as she joined him, her hand resting naturally on his arm, and the sight hit Emily like a wave, sharp and undeniable, draining the warmth from her body as her hopes collapsed in seconds, and she felt tears rise but stayed silent, frozen, as Mark laughed and guided the woman inside the restaurant without looking back. And in that moment the truth settled heavily in her chest, leaving no space for excuses or doubts, and the taxi remained still, a quiet shelter from the world, while Daniel spoke softly for the first time since they stopped, asking if she wanted him to wait, and Emily nodded because she could not trust her voice. And as minutes passed, she realized she was breathing unevenly, her emotions tangled between grief, anger, and disbelief. And Daniel, without turning around, reached into the console and handed her a clean tissue, the simple gesture opening a crack in the wall she had built around herself, and she wiped her eyes, ashamed but relieved, while Daniel said calmly that sometimes people followed others hoping to feel safe again but instead found honesty, his words not dramatic or judgmental, just real, and that honesty hurt deeply, yet it also lifted a weight Emily had been carrying alone, and she finally whispered that she wanted to leave, not knowing where to go. And Daniel drove away smoothly, leaving the restaurant behind as if it were a bad dream, and the city moved around them again, lights flashing, streets unfolding, while Emily stared out the window, feeling strangely numb but also awake in a way she hadn't felt in years, aware that her marriage was broken but also that she was still here, still breathing, and still moving forward. And though she did not know it yet, this single ride, born from suspicion and fear, was quietly shifting the direction of her life. Because in the silence of that taxi, as the car carried her through the night, Emily was not just following her cheating husband anymore. She was beginning, without meaning to follow a new path entirely. Emily stayed in the taxi as the restaurant doors closed behind Mark and the woman, the image burning into her memory even as Daniel pulled the car forward and drove away from the harbor, the quiet hum of the engine filling the space where words failed. and for several blocks Emily said nothing, her eyes fixed on the passing streets while her thoughts crashed into each other, replaying every moment of her marriage and questioning how she had missed the signs for so long. And when Daniel asked gently if she wanted to be taken home, the word home felt strange and heavy, so she told him to keep driving, anywhere, because she was not ready to face walls filled with shared memories, and the taxi moved through Boston's night roads, crossing bridges and quiet neighborhoods, the city seeming softer after dark, and Emily finally spoke, not giving details but admitting that the man she followed was her husband and that what she saw had broken something she could not fix, and Daniel listened without interrupting, his focus steady on the road, offering her something rare in that moment, space to speak without judgment, and as she talked, the pain spilled out faster than she expected, how Mark had grown distant, how she had waited for him to come back emotionally, how she had blamed herself for his silence, and Daniel responded with short, thoughtful words, never trying to solve her life, only acknowledging the hurt and reminding her that betrayal said more about choices than worth, and those words settled deep inside her, because for weeks she had felt small and unsure, and now, sitting in the back of a stranger's taxi, she felt seen in a way she hadn't in her own marriage, and as they stopped at a red light near the river, Emily wiped her eyes and apologized for crying, but Daniel told her calmly that nights like this were heavier than people expected and that tears were not weakness, and she believed him, because his tone held no pity, only respect, and when she asked about him, he shared a little about his long shifts, his love for quiet drives, and his daughter who kept him grounded, and those simple details made him feel real, not just a driver passing through her worst moment, and eventually Daniel slowed near her apartment building, the place she once felt safe but now felt unsure of, and Emily hesitated before getting out, knowing that once the door closed, the world would rush back in, and she thanked him, her voice steady but soft, and Daniel gave her a small, reassuring smile, telling her to take care of herself, and as she stepped onto the sidewalk, she felt lighter than when she had entered the taxi, not healed, not fixed, but steadier, and upstairs, alone in her apartment, Emily sat on the edge of the bed and let the truth settle fully, realizing that denial was gone and clarity had taken its place, and in the days that followed, she moved through life on autopilot, going to work, answering messages, and avoiding Mark's calls until she was ready. And when she finally confronted him, the conversation was calm but painful, his excuses confirming what she already knew, and though the words hurt, they did not surprise her, because she had already seen the truth with her own eyes, and something inside her had shifted that night in the taxi, a quiet strength taking root, and weeks later, on a rainy evening after a long day, Emily stepped outside and saw a familiar taxi pull up at the curb, Daniel behind the wheel, looking just as surprised to see her. And in that brief moment of recognition, she felt an unexpected warmth. Not because her pain was gone, but because she remembered that even on the night her marriage broke, kindness had found her, and as she slid into the back seat once again, Emily realized that the ride she thought was the end of everything might have only been the beginning. After that rainy evening when Emily unexpectedly met Daniel again, life began to move faster than she had expected, and though she was still carrying the weight of her broken marriage, something about seeing a familiar, kind face made the city feel less cold, and as Daniel drove her home that night, they talked easily, not about Mark or betrayal, but about work, music on the radio, and how rain made the streets shine like glass, and when the ride ended, Emily realized she was smiling for the first time in weeks, and from then on their meetings became small but meaningful moments woven into her days, sometimes by chance and sometimes because Emily found herself choosing Daniel's taxi stand when she needed a ride. And each time they spoke a little more, sharing pieces of their lives without pressure, Daniel talking about his daughter's college plans and his long nights driving, Emily speaking about rebuilding herself, attending counseling, and learning to be alone again, and there was comfort in the honesty between them, because neither pretended to be healed or perfect, and as weeks passed, Emily moved out of the apartment she once shared with Mark and into a smaller place closer to the river, a space that felt like a fresh start, and Daniel helped her one afternoon by driving her boxes, refusing extra pay and telling her that everyone deserved help during change, and that simple support stayed with her, because it was given freely and without expectation, and though attraction slowly grew between them, it stayed quiet and respectful, living in long conversations, shared laughter, and the way Daniel always made sure she got home safely, and Emily noticed how different this felt from her marriage, where attention had faded, and now she was learning that care could be steady and calm. And one evening after coffee near the harbor, Daniel admitted that he liked her but didn't want to be someone she leaned on just because she was hurting, and his honesty surprised her, because it showed patience rather than desire, and Emily responded with equal truth, telling him that she wasn't looking to escape her pain but to move forward with clear eyes, and that moment set the tone for everything that followed, because they agreed to take things slowly, letting trust grow naturally. And as winter turned toward spring, Emily finalized her separation from Mark, facing the paperwork and difficult conversations with a strength she didn't know she had, and through it all, Daniel remained a steady presence, never pushing, always listening, and sometimes just sitting beside her in silence when words felt too heavy. And Emily began to see that love did not have to be loud or dramatic to be real. And one night, after walking along the river under soft streetlights, Daniel reached for her hand and paused, giving her time to decide, and when she placed her hand in his, it felt like a choice made with clarity rather than fear, and in that simple gesture, Emily understood that while her past had shaped her, it no longer controlled her, and the road ahead, though uncertain, felt hopeful for the first time in a long while. Spring arrived in Boston with clear skies and a quiet sense of renewal, and Emily felt it not just in the warmer air but inside herself, because the final papers of her divorce were signed without drama, closing a chapter that had once defined her life but no longer held power over her heart, and instead of feeling empty, she felt calm, as if letting go had made room for something honest. And during those weeks Daniel stayed close in a gentle way, never rushing her feelings, never making promises he couldn't keep, simply showing up when he said he would, whether it was a walk along the river after work, a shared coffee before his night shift, or a quiet drive through familiar streets where conversation flowed easily. And Emily noticed how safe she felt with him, not because he saved her, but because he respected her strength. And as days passed, their bond deepened through simple moments, laughter over small mistakes, talks about the future without pressure, and shared silences that felt full instead of awkward. And one evening Daniel took her to the harbor where everything had first changed, the water reflecting city lights as boats rocked gently. And standing there Emily realized how far she had come from the woman who once sat trembling in the back of a taxi, chasing answers, because now she stood steady, choosing honesty over fear. And Daniel spoke about his hopes, about building a life grounded in trust and consistency, and Emily listened not with doubt but with clarity, knowing she was ready to love again not out of loneliness but choice. And when he reached for her hand this time, there was no hesitation at all, only warmth and certainty. And their connection felt real because it grew slowly, shaped by patience and understanding rather than pain. And as months passed, Emily rebuilt her life fully, decorating her new apartment, reconnecting with friends, and rediscovering parts of herself she had set aside. And Daniel became part of that life naturally, not as a replacement for what she lost but as something entirely new. And on a quiet evening filled with laughter and shared dreams, Emily understood that following her husband had once led her to heartbreak, but following her instincts afterward had led her to peace. And in loving a man who treated her with care and honesty, she found not just romance but herself again. And the road ahead no longer felt uncertain, because this time she wasn't chasing someone who walked away, she was walking beside someone who chose to stay.